So, good afternoon. I am so thrilled to be here today with Maux Elworthy, Death Doula and Counselor. Welcome, Mo.
Tracy, thank you. I'm so happy to be here with you.
Just a little bit about the Living Resource Project. This is a compassionate communities initiative that serves to remind us that we all have what it takes to show up for the living and grieving and dying among us, and that we need each other on this journey through life, including death. So, Mo, can you just share a little bit about what you do to support the dying and their people?
Yes, a lot of my work has been centered around their people. So, supporting people who are in grief or who are companioning their people or their loved ones towards death, or people who have recently lost someone to death or traumatic loss or death. So, I do a lot of that grief companioning work, inspired by Alan Wolfeld's companioning, walking alongside people, creating space for people to unpack their process and experience. And for people who are caregivers or loved ones, walking alongside someone who is dying, making space for them to process their experience so that they have conversations about their own emotional, spiritual, sometimes practical journey, but often they're so focused on caring for, tending to, being for the person who's dying that they don't always have space to reflect and say, what do I need? What do I want out of this process? What do I need to say? And so a lot of my work has been around that, around supporting the people who are looking at death from, yeah, some angle.
That's just so important. From what I notice is that obviously grief happens always. I mean, just by being human in this world today, there's so much loss and so many things that we're grieving on a constant basis, like non-death grief. And I just noticed that grief really complicates the end of life journey. And it's something that people don't talk about that much. So often I think grief is really connected to the death loss after living with a life-living illness or even after a sudden death. But I'm just wondering if you can share a little bit about the non-death grief that you see with the people who are companioning their people on the end of life journey.
Yeah, I think grief is one of those things. Oh, that I grieve that we don't have more grief literacy in our world. I think that grief is one of those things that we push down as humans. So often it's not a pretty, cozy, beautiful thing. And so sometimes in our lives, we are so busy just keeping up and getting on with life that we don't make space to unpack other losses, whether it's relationships, jobs, traumatic events, hopes, dreams, even ourselves. We go through so many iterations as humans. I think sometimes we don't really let go of things or have time to process endings very well. And often I see those things, non-death loss or other kinds of grief or these endings kind of pop up at inconvenient times while someone is grieving a loved one dying or a person in their life dying because we haven't processed those things. So whether it's a past conflict, a hope we had for our relationship that never came to fruition, especially when I think about caring for and walking alongside people who are children of someone who's dying. There's a lot in that relationship that we don't always make time or space for. And so sometimes those grief pieces bubble up to the surface during the end of life journey. And I think they can really complicate that process for people to be alongside their loved one and for the grief itself, as you're saying, it can make it sticky to be with.
Sticky. Yeah. And I think so often people just feel like they're going crazy and just simply normalizing actually you're grieving and anticipatory grief that happens after a terminal diagnosis that happens not just to the person who's received the diagnosis, but also all the people that care for that person or know that person. That can, I think, without naming it and saying this is a grief response, people just feel really a sense of going crazy or feeling more out of control than need be. And just the sense of ease that can so often be felt when you can name it, normalize it, validate it. You can almost just in real time see stress disappearing and people feeling more grounded and more centered. But I totally agree with what you said at the beginning is like feeling grief for lack of grief literacy because it just seems like so many people don't have that information and I really wish more people did. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think sometimes it's inconvenient to honor our grief in our society. And
Mm.
so we often feel some sense of need to keep going at a rate that's not in congruence with what's happening inside of us. And yeah, to normalize that sometimes in the anticipatory grief of looking ahead to a death, little things pop up and we don't always understand why they hurt so bad or seem all consuming or yeah, or seem to take over that lack of control that you spoke about. I think a lot of people find themselves in the swirl of that and it can feel really isolating.
Yeah. So much work to be done.
Hmm.
So, Mo, can you just share a little bit about the path that led you to the work that you do today?
Yeah. When I look at my path, my interest in being with grief and companioning people started in 2006 when I started volunteering on a crisis line. And I was drawn to that work because I saw how many things we don't talk about in society, suicide being one of them, self-harm, addiction, mental health challenges, grief, loss. And I wanted to be part of a change towards a space where people could call and talk about whatever was on their mind confidentially. And so I volunteered on the crisis line all through my university, so 4+ years, and I loved it. I found this community of people who were just very real and were drawn there for different reasons, but it was like I get goosebumps thinking about the people that I worked alongside. It was special. And it was the first time I really got to experience being in service for holding space for people. And I loved it so much, I started working in that field and I ended up managing a youth crisis service where I got to train volunteers and manage a team of people who were offering this anonymous support to youth across Canada every night. And it really filled me up to be able to offer something to community and anonymously, just in service of people who might need it, not knowing who it was, not knowing if I'd ever talk to that person again, but just really believing that we need more space to share without shame and judgment.
Wow.
Yeah.
Pretty inspiring.
Oh, it
Yeah.
it still inspires me, like some of the conversations I had then. And through that work, I got the opportunity to train as a suicide intervention trainer. And so I still teach a course around BC to help people have conversations around suicide. And a big part of that course is holding space for conversations around experience of suicide and traumatic loss. And yeah, being witness to people's stories and the pain that people go through and are able to live with is really humbling and continues to fuel me in wanting to learn more about how I can be here for people. My path took a turn. I ended up working more corporate space of change management and executive coaching. And then COVID happened, and I wanted to return to the mental health side, feeling like I had more to offer and wanting to go back to that heart-centered work. And so that brought me into curiosity around grief and loss. And then the personal twinge, I guess my own Gran, who I was quite close with, was on a death journey. Yeah, I noticed that people around her, the medical system, weren't able to have frank conversations about death.
Hmm.
And Atul Gawande's work really spoke to me, where everyone around her was talking about getting her back to her apartment, how long she can live, nursing supports and things. And frankly, she was really ready to die. And so I was really grateful that I was able to have some honest conversations with her about her fears and her hopes and encourage family to call and say goodbye and have, closure moments and legacy moments. And yeah, it was really beautiful and it brought us closer and brought me closer to some of my family. And it had me stepping back thinking, okay, if the medical system isn't doing this for people, who is? Because most of my family weren't comfortable having those conversations. And then someone told me about this thing called the Death Doula, which is how I found you because I took your course at Douglas College. Yeah, and so then I took the course and then I was really inspired. I remember you talking about creating ripples. And so I came back into I was working as a coach at that time, supporting people in their mental health. And I came back to that work with more intention around grief. And I started hosting death cafes, which I thought this is a way I can give back to community, just to see, are there people who want to have these conversations? And I felt like a bit of a weirdo, walking in with my water bottle with this big sticker that says, talking about death won't kill you. And I was like, I don't know if people are going to show up for this. I had a couple of friends who were very supportive, but I thought it might just be me and a couple of my people. I don't know. And yeah, and that movement has blossomed, and I've hosted about a dozen death cafes now. The biggest one I hosted had over 50 people in attendance. And it really, yeah, it fueled me because I see, wow, people do want to talk about this. We don't always know how, but we do want to talk about the fact that we're mortal and we do want to connect with other people. And yeah, so that's a bit about how I got here and where I am today.
Amazing. You are a bit of a sensation, I must say. I hear whenever I facilitate the end of life doula course at Douglas, and people get all excited and they're like, "Oh, there's a death cafe coming up. It's some woman, Mo." I'm like, "Of course it is. I know her. Go, go, go." And I just want to say thank you so much for that story about your Nan. I just think it's remarkable time and time again hearing these stories, just like you shared, beautiful stories of this tender, sacred time when even without training, you knew how to show up for her. We
Mhm.
already have what it takes to companion our people, and being like intentional and slowing down and listening like you did to your Nan, to be wise enough to see that the way that her care team was approaching her was not aligned with the idea of where she was headed. And it must create a sense of isolation and abandonment, I think, in people who are being treated in such a way. But to have someone as wise and as in touch with your Nan as you are, to meet her where she was at and to be able to see what her needs were and support those needs and companion her so beautifully. I just love that story. And it was long before you took any death doula course or counseling course. You just knew intuitively what to do. Thanks for that story.
Thanks, Tracy.
Mhm. Speaking of stories, can you share a story about the work that you do? Maybe it's a story about a client or a situation that surprised you or deepened your understanding about the end of life journey.
Yeah, for sure. I can tell a story about a family that I supported, and I'll anonymize some of the details.
Mhm.
But I was hired by a sibling to support their sibling who was dying. And, in the initial conversations, the emails back and forth, it was like, okay, we want you to go in and sit vigil and be in support, have conversations. We're not sure how long they're going to be here. It's quite a short prognosis towards death. So it might just be a couple days, but we'd like you to be there, 3 times a week, kind of. And we checked it out with the hospice and everything. And then I sat down with the person who had called me and a parent of theirs to talk about what was really needed. And what unfolded was that actually the person who called, although they were calling for the sibling, really was the one that needed care and had a lot of unfinished business around the death. And so I ended up supporting them and the parent more than the dying sibling. And it taught me a lot of things working with this family system, supporting people and having conversations that they haven't had space for, and closure when the person who's dying isn't able to speak back. And a couple other pieces were that the prognosis was so the medical team was so confident about their prognosis, but it didn't unfold that way at all. This person had a bit of a roller coaster end of life and was with us alive much longer than they anticipated. And so I was companioning this original client for quite some time, unexpectedly. And then it came to a point in their journey where they were ready to have a moment with the dying sibling, and we did this really powerful ceremony. They weren't necessarily spiritual or religious person, but the sibling who was dying, was very religious. And so we co-created a ceremony with a number of really simple rituals, which ultimately were there to allow everyone in the family to say goodbye and to make peace with the process and to share their love for the person in whatever way felt right for them. And that was a really, yeah, a real blessing for me to be part of because I wasn't sure how open some of the family members would be. And in the moment, everyone held such reverence for the process and for the person who was dying and included a lot of scripture and song that meant a lot to the person who was dying. And there was this lightness in the room after when I left. And the person passed 2 days later.
Yeah.
After many months of quite challenging back and forth, up and down. Yeah, and so that, wow, a couple things stood out for me there. It's not always clear who needs the support. It's not always clear how many things need to be said. And the power of ritual for allowing people space to say what they really want to say, you know?
Or not say. I find ritual goes beyond
Mhm.
words. Those actions
Mhm.
really create more space for expression that sometimes is hard to find the words for. What a profound story, and just really confirms the need for expression of love at end
Yeah.
of life. It seems to so often come back to expressing love and
Mhm.
also the importance of saying goodbye. That maybe feels a bit abrupt or almost like you're making something happen, but the power of saying goodbye and that completion of relationships is so healthy for the people left behind. And often, like your story seems to allude to, gives the dying person the permission they need to leave. So powerful. Thank you for that story. Whew. Hmm.
Mhm.
So, Mo, if there was one thing that you would like the dying and their people to know, what would it be?
Yeah, that you don't have to do this alone. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we're not designed to, are we?
No, I don't think so. And yeah, what you just said about that sharing of love, transmitting love and care and completion, closure. I think the other thing that stands out for me in a lot of the work I've done is that the timeline of death is so unknown. And I think as humans, sometimes we think we have so much control or clarity on how things will unfold. And doing this work is such a lesson and reminder for me that I'm mortal and I don't know what tomorrow will look like, if I will have a tomorrow, how much time I have with the people around me. And so the other piece I would say is don't wait.
Yeah.
Don't wait. The timeline is unknown and you don't have to do it alone.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
So let's dream a little bit together. What are you dreaming about as you look ahead to the future of death care? Can you think of what is needed, how we can meet dying with more acceptance, perhaps more grace? What do you dream about, Mo?
Hmm. The word that keeps coming up to me is community.
Mhm.
And, I think one thing that's important to me is to be part of a community of people doing this work. And I imagine that there are others who are getting into this work and not knowing where or how or when and wanting some companionship in this journey. We don't have to do it alone as practitioners either. And then the other piece for me is around, I'm thinking about being in one of these death cafes, a community hall full of the bubble of conversation, and there's laughter and there's tears and there are people sharing intimate life. I think there's something there for me in this ripple that you talk about of wanting more death literacy, more grief literacy, more awareness of how we can be with these parts of life and that it is a natural part of life. More people talking about our dead loved ones and holding, yeah, kind of lowering the veil between this world and that world by acknowledging it more.
Yes, thank you. More, please.
More, please, more conversation, more connection. Yeah,
And
more.
it sounds like you are working hard to make your dreams come true. As you were speaking, all the things that you're dreaming into, it really seems like you're taking actionable steps to do what you can to make these dreams come true. I love that.
Well, I'm really grateful to be alongside other people in this world. And I'm grateful to you, Tracy, for planting so many seeds that are creating the ripples out in the world. And yeah, that I think about that doula course so often in my work, and it continues to humble and inspire me going through those activities of looking at my own mortality. And I think that's a big part of it for me is like staying humble, staying honest about the fact that I'm mortal and I don't know. And
Hmm.
yeah, bringing a lot of curiosity to this work. What could it look like? How could we be with each other?
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you for that heart paycheck too, because I really believe that's how we change the world is just with that small scale change, planting seeds, like you say, and ripples. And really, it maybe doesn't seem like huge scale change, but if enough of us do it, this is really how we change culture. And we really do need to look at changing death culture in North America. And I really think it's happening in real time. It's pretty exciting. I wonder if you're noticing that too in the time you've been interested in death care and grief care. I see that there's been like this real uptick in the amount of people that are called to this work, the amount of people that are doing work to just address a lot of the things that you brought up today as things you're hoping to change. So I think it's hopeful and I think it's awesome to think of these ripples and the tsunamis that they can create if there's enough of them. Beautiful. Well, Mo, to end today, we're going to pull a gratitude card from the
Ooh.
gratitude card deck. It's from the schooloflife.com. So I'm going to give it a little shuffle here and we'll end on a note of gratitude. Gratitude is so powerful. So let's see. Take this one. Oh, it's a beautiful image. It looks like a bunch of trees.
Oh,
No leaves. Wasn't that stunning?
yeah.
Yeah. And on the back, there are just three words. We're still here.
Mm.
Grateful for that.
Mm.
Thank you so much, Mo, for being here today and for supporting the Living Resource Project. If you want to find out more about Mo, you can see our show notes on how to get in touch with her and the work she's doing around Vancouver. So deep gratitude for you, Mo. And again, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Tracy. So much gratitude for you and the work you do.
Okay. Until we meet again.
Thanks.
Bye.